Born in 1964, Joanna Simpson came from a wealthy family in Yorkshire, England, where she spent her childhood. She attended a private girls' elementary school, completing several grades before her family decided to relocate. After selling the family construction business, the Simpsons settled in the town of Laxey on the Isle of Man. After finishing her education at the local school, she continued her studies at a secondary school in Oxford, later pursuing business disciplines at university. Among her peers, Joanna enjoyed considerable popularity. Well-mannered, kind, and cheerful, she gladly helped those with whom she maintained friendships. This character trait attracted people. She was constantly surrounded by schoolmates and university friends who valued the time spent in her company. Naturally, among this circle there were always young men eager to win her affection. Despite this, the young woman focused primarily on professional growth and career building, striving to achieve financial independence before starting a family. Joanna decided to marry only at the age of 30. This happened in 1994. Her chosen partner also belonged to the wealthy class of society. The couple jointly purchased a spacious estate in Ascot, which was in a neglected state and required major renovation for comfortable living. Since the couple didn't yet have children, purchasing such a large property surprised those around them. The couple lived together near Windsor with its royal castle. Nearby was also the Legoland amusement park, making the location attractive for future family expansion. However, Joanna wasn't in a hurry to have children. She planned to convert part of the estate into guest rooms for regularly hosting relatives and friends. Although her husband supported his wife's plan, he likely wanted to become a father. Despite the apparent harmony in their relationship, after 3 years of marriage, the husband initiated divorce proceedings. The reason, evidently, was the absence of children he had been waiting for. This decision was a real blow to Joanna. Friends, noticing her depressed state, tried to support her. A close friend who worked as a senior flight attendant and had an upcoming flight to South Africa invited Joanna to join her, hoping the trip would provide a distraction. Joanna accepted the offer. This choice proved fateful. During the flight, the woman met Robert Brown, a British Airways captain. Besides his profession as a pilot, the man was passionate about running and held the title of 3-time British cross-country champion, of which he was extremely proud. Mutual attraction developed between them, blossoming into a romantic relationship. The house in Ascot remained in Joanna's possession after the divorce, as she had invested the majority of the funds in its purchase. Returning from Africa, the couple settled there together. By autumn 1998, they were already discussing the possibility of marriage, and at Christmas, Robert proposed. Events unfolded rapidly. Joanna, usually cautious in such matters, this time acted impulsively. Getting engaged in February, the couple officially formalized their relationship in 1999. Such haste surprised those around them, particularly the bride's parents, who had only met Robert a few times. Their impression was negative. They considered him overly self-confident and incapable of truly loving their daughter. However, it was impossible to convince Joanna. An adult, self-sufficient woman had the right to her own decisions. The most the parents could achieve was persuading their daughter to sign a prenuptial agreement. The Simpsons anticipated a quick end to this relationship and sought to protect their daughter from property losses in case of divorce. The wedding ceremony gathered about 20 guests. The newlyweds consciously avoided excessive pomp and unnecessary attention. Immediately after the ceremony, the couple went to where they first met, South Africa. Joanna expected a wonderful trip, but the first days brought disappointment and doubts. Robert's behavior toward the hotel service staff was shockingly condescending, causing Joanna disgust. She hadn't observed such rudeness in her beloved before. While still on the trip, the woman called her mother, sharing her concerns about the correctness of her choice. She realized she didn't know Robert's character well enough and fearfully observed his true nature during the journey. Joanna feared that soon such behavior would extend to her as well. Despite recognizing the mistake of her decision, the woman didn't dare break off the relationship immediately after returning from Africa. She decided to try to change her husband. This decision was likely influenced by the pregnancy discovered after the trip. Like many women, Joanna hoped that fatherhood would make her husband more attentive and caring. However, Robert seemed determined to destroy all her hopes. Learning about his wife's pregnancy and upcoming maternity leave, instead of the expected softening, he became even ruder and more aggressive. His unacceptable behavior now also affected Joanna's relatives and friends. Despite this, the woman refrained from divorce, fearing to leave the child without a father, which she considered a serious problem. The birth of their son Alex didn't improve the situation. Soon Joanna became pregnant again and gave birth to daughter Katie, but the appearance of a second child also didn't change Robert's behavior. However, the husband hadn't yet resorted to physical violence. Perhaps this was what kept the couple from final separation. But all of Joanna's loved ones saw the psychological damage her husband was inflicting. His toxic behavior and rude treatment of her circle caused the woman pain. Over time, the contrast between the spouses became increasingly obvious. Such different people shouldn't have tied their lives together. Joanna understood this perfectly, but thoughts of the children kept her from decisive action. Already after the birth of their first child, she repeatedly acknowledged the inevitability of the future dissolution of the marriage. The woman endured as long as she could, but after 8 years of married life, she understood the impossibility of further coexistence. The final decision came after her husband shared horrifying fantasies. He contemplated killing his wife and children with an axe, followed by suicide through deliberately crashing a plane. The frightened woman initiated divorce proceedings in 2007. From then on, Robert's behavior deteriorated even further. The man openly demonstrated hatred toward his wife's relatives and toward her. He resorted to manipulation, threatening suicide. When this yielded no results, veiled threats began to harm Joanna and the children. The woman hesitated whether to take these words seriously or consider them another manipulative tactic. She was inclined to think that Robert was deliberately intimidating her to force her to withdraw the divorce petition. To friends, the man explained his unwillingness to divorce by his desire to remain close to the children. His work as a pilot involved lengthy overseas assignments for several weeks, which already limited time with his offspring. Despite categorically rejecting the separation, Robert made no effort to change his own behavior, which might have made Joanna reconsider her decision. The first months after filing for divorce, the couple continued living under one roof. It was then that an incident occurred that finally convinced the woman of the correctness of her chosen path. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, another argument erupted between the spouses. Robert groundlessly accused his wife of marital infidelity. Such accusations came from him constantly but were always unfounded. Joanna devoted herself entirely to motherhood, having neither time nor desire for romantic adventures. The woman's attempts to justify herself proved futile. The conflict flared up in the kitchen, where at one point Robert grabbed a knife, approached his wife, and held the blade to her throat, threatening murder. Despite the critical situation, the victim of aggression maintained her composure. In a calm tone, Joanna explained the senselessness of his intention. After all, her husband was aware of her maternal qualities. Murder would deprive the children of both parents simultaneously. The woman emphasized the inevitability of imprisonment for such a spontaneous crime. The arguments worked. The domestic aggressor lowered the weapon. The next day, Joanna told her mother and several close friends about the incident. Everyone insisted on contacting law enforcement, considering it unacceptable to ignore such a threat. Those around her noted the unpredictability and danger of Robert's behavior after initiating the divorce. However, Joanna feared traumatizing the children with their father's possible arrest. She hoped for a natural resolution of the situation, especially after another conversation with her husband, during which she categorically rejected the possibility of reconciliation. Robert seemed to accept the inevitability. Joanna persistently demanded that Robert leave her residence, considering further cohabitation dangerous for everyone. However, the man categorically refused to change his place of residence. He enjoyed living in a luxurious estate with all the advantages of a wealthy existence. Attempts to offer monetary compensation for purchasing separate housing met with refusal. Those around them assumed the man was counting on a more advantageous financial offer from Joanna's wealthy family. After several attempts with gradually increasing amounts offered, Robert finally agreed. He moved out. Joanna felt relief, the threat to her safety had disappeared. The parents agreed on joint custody of the children. The woman awaited the completion of the divorce process when suddenly an acute conflict arose regarding the division of property. Despite the prenuptial agreement, Robert claimed a share of the property. The former spouses were forced to maintain contact to coordinate the father's meetings with the children. Joanna did everything to demonstrate the impossibility of resuming their relationship to stop any attempts at courtship from her ex. The strategy seemed to work. They lived separately. Robert even began a romantic relationship with a colleague flight attendant. Soon the woman became pregnant. Joanna received this news positively, hoping that the new relationship and future fatherhood would divert her ex-husband's attention. However, these hopes proved futile. On November 1, 2010, a man whose behavior aroused suspicion visited the local police station. He avoided specifics, vaguely hinting at some incident, carefully weighing every word. The visitor sought to attract the attention of law enforcement but simultaneously categorically objected to their visiting his home, explaining this by concern for 4 children who were under his care. The man identified himself as Robert Brown. Around the same time as Robert's visit to the police, Joanna's friend received a call from the school where her children studied. This happened the same day. Alex and Katie hadn't appeared for classes. Teachers unsuccessfully tried to contact the mother, so they turned to her friend, listed as a contact person. She didn't have exact information about Joanna's whereabouts. The autumn break in English schools had just ended, during which the children had been home for a week. Alex and Katie had spent the break with their biological father. Joanna had planned to visit her parents on the Isle of Man. The moment of the woman's disappearance and the fate of the 8- and 9-year-old children couldn't be established, causing serious concern. Receiving the alarming call from school, the friend immediately contacted Joanna's mother. She reported that after visiting the Isle of Man, her daughter was supposed to return to Ascot. They hadn't communicated on the day of return. The worried mother tried to call her daughter, but in vain. After another conversation with the friend and unsuccessful attempts to find Joanna, they decided to notify law enforcement. At that point, Robert had already arranged a meeting with the police. Comparing both appeals, detectives decided to immediately check the missing woman's house. The residence was empty, no one answered the persistent knocking. Law enforcement decided to break down the doors. Entering, they immediately noticed suspicious stains in the hallway, resembling blood. A thorough search yielded no results. Neither Joanna nor the children were found in the house. The detectives returned to the station empty-handed, awaiting the scheduled meeting with Robert. Arriving at the station, the man unexpectedly refused to answer questions about his wife. His behavior seemed paradoxical. He had initiated contact with the police himself but now avoided providing information. Considering Joanna's prolonged absence, Robert was arrested. A thorough inspection of the large territory around the missing woman's house began. The situation remained mysterious, so they weren't in a hurry to press charges. Parallel to inspecting the territory, detectives spoke with Joanna's family. Everyone insisted on the impossibility of the woman's spontaneous disappearance, who had never planned to take the children anywhere. Relatives unanimously pointed to Robert as the only person potentially involved in the disappearance. The first day of searches yielded only one confirmed fact: Robert had taken the children to his brother's house. This somewhat reassured the missing woman's family. At least Alex and Katie were safe. On November 2, Robert was interrogated again. Every attempt to obtain information about the events of October 31 met with a standard response: no comment. Detectives changed tactics, moving to everyday topics. The man immediately became animated, enthusiastically talking about his passion for running. But as soon as they returned to the topic of Joanna, he again became closed and nervous. Robert quite openly described married life, but focused on his wife's negative traits, calling her a spoiled child, trying in every way to discredit her. He constantly mentioned Joanna's and her family's financial well-being, emphasizing their ignorance about the true value of money. After a lengthy conversation, detectives concluded that Robert felt hatred toward them exclusively because of their wealth. The man himself came from a working-class Edinburgh family. His father worked at the port, his mother served in a bank. The family lived modestly but without hardship. They were far from the Simpsons' level of prosperity. Robert as a pilot earned about $150,000 annually, which also gave no grounds for complaints, yet the dissatisfaction didn't subside. Detectives spent a long time conversing on neutral topics. Robert willingly maintained the conversation, but every question about Joanna or the events of October 31st elicited the standard refusal to comment. To the investigators' surprise, the man explained this as a psychological block. Supposedly his consciousness prevented him from answering such questions. All attempts to overcome this barrier proved futile. The investigation continued gathering evidence. During a deeper inspection of Joanna's house, they found additional blood traces in the living room and several places in the inner courtyard and driveway. The location of the stains indicated body movement. Collected samples confirmed the blood belonged to Joanna. The investigation assumed Robert had murdered his ex-wife, but the motive for the crime 3 years after separation, when the man was already building a new life, remained unclear. However, the suspect himself inadvertently hinted at a possible reason. He was clearly troubled by Joanna's wealth. The signed prenuptial agreement theoretically deprived him of the right to a share of his wife's property after divorce. The investigation established that Joanna didn't spread information about her family's financial status. After separation and moving out, Robert regularly visited her house in the owner's absence. He even convinced the children to share the new alarm code for unimpeded access. The main object of his interest became his ex-wife's financial documents. The man was consumed by a mania regarding millions hidden in Joanna's accounts. His fantasies reached absurdity. He believed in the existence of £25 million that he could claim in the absence of a marriage contract. For a long time, British law didn't recognize prenuptial agreements without additional court proceedings. But from October 20, 2010, such contracts gained legal force without unnecessary procedures. Therefore, in divorce, Robert wouldn't receive a single penny from his wife's property, and he was aware of this. Notably, the next hearing in the divorce case was scheduled for November 8 of the same year. The high probability of final dissolution of the marriage precisely then explained why Robert decided to act a week before this date. During the break, Alex and Katie stayed with their father. On Sunday, October 31st, he was supposed to return them to their mother. Joanna was preparing to meet the children she missed. She baked a chocolate cake and prepared their favorite dishes. Usually during such meetings, the woman invited one of her friends due to fear of her ex-husband. This time the friend couldn't come, so Joanna met Alex and Katie alone. Detectives interviewed the former couple's children. Their testimony clarified the picture of events. The conflict between the parents began immediately after Robert's arrival with the children around 4 in the afternoon. The children were in the adjacent room, didn't see the events, but heard sounds resembling a fight, dull thuds. Later the suspicious sound stopped. Robert carried the unconscious Joanna in his arms and placed her in the car trunk. To the children, the father explained that Mom had injured herself falling, so he was taking her to the hospital. Closing the trunk, the man ordered the children to get in the car and drove them to his house, where his new girlfriend met them. Leaving the children, Robert immediately left, returning only at 7 in the evening. Joanna wasn't with him. He answered the children's questions evasively. Thus, the man had about 3 hours at his disposal. What he did and where he took Joanna remained a mystery. Subsequent interrogations of Robert yielded no results. 9 times investigators tried to obtain information about the events of October 31st and the fate of his ex-wife, but each time heard the standard, no comment. After the last attempt, the man requested a confidential conversation with his lawyer. They secluded themselves in a separate room. 20 minutes later, the lawyer returned with his client's statement admitting guilt in murdering his ex-wife. According to Robert, the argument with Joanna arose over the children's education. At one point he lost self-control and struck his wife several times. He planned to take the children home and then deliver Joanna to the hospital. But after leaving the children, he realized the woman had died. The man panicked and decided to hide the body in the forest. The version sounded unconvincing. Robert could have immediately taken the injured woman to the hospital. The decision to place her in the trunk instead of the cabin remained unclear. Obviously, the man understood from the beginning that Joanna was dead, so he hid the body from the children. Robert agreed to show the burial site. At the indicated location, they indeed found the body of the 46-year-old mother of 2 children. Without the confession, finding the burial site would have been practically impossible. The criminal had prepared thoroughly. He carried the body several kilometers deep into the forest from the nearest road, into dense thickets. There Robert dug a deep pit, which he then carefully camouflaged with leaves. The depth of the pit raised doubts about the truthfulness of Robert's version. No traces of fresh digging were observed around. Experts calculated that the criminal had removed about 400 kilograms of soil, which required significant time. The frozen ground complicated digging. Completing such work in 3 hours seemed unrealistic. The absence of traces of excavated soil around indicated its removal. The facts testified to advanced preparation of the grave. Suspicions about the planned murder were confirmed. When the children were brought to the burial site to say goodbye to their mother, they recognized the territory. Nearby was their secret hideout. They had last been here during the break, staying at their father's. Obviously, it was then that he prepared the burial for his ex-wife while the children played nearby. Of course, Robert insisted on the spontaneity of the crime. According to his version, the attack happened accidentally due to loss of self-control resulting from stress from the protracted divorce. The defense claimed the crime was committed in a state of affect, which gave grounds to hope for mitigation of punishment. The forensic medical examination results revealed at least 14 blows with a blunt object to the victim's head. The murder weapon was a claw hammer found in the container along with the body. The presence of this tool contradicted the version of unplanned murder. Why did Robert bring it to the house? Later the man clarified that he took the hammer from his shed and hid it in his daughter's backpack, but couldn't explain the purpose of these actions. The container contained additional evidence of crime planning: a protective coverall, plastic shoe covers, rubber gloves. After the murder, the criminal took the video surveillance system storage device from the house and the hammer, disposing of them. All facts indicated careful preparation and conscious actions. May 2011 marked the beginning of the trial in the murder case. The prosecution insisted on the intentional nature of the crime with prior planning. The defense presented the client as a victim of years of abuse from a wealthy and arrogant wife who totally controlled his life. Robert complained about being forced to sign the prenuptial agreement, seeing in this an attempt to deprive him of compensation for years of humiliation in marriage with a member of the Simpson family. Supposedly at the critical moment, the man couldn't withstand the emotional pressure and committed murder in a state of affect. The jury's verdict shocked the public. Robert was found guilty of manslaughter. Instead of life imprisonment, the criminal received 26 years, of which 2 were for obstructing the investigation. British law provided for actual serving of only half the term behind bars, the rest under police supervision. Theoretically, Robert could be released in November 2023. The victim's parents couldn't accept such a prospect. They devoted years to fighting for reform of legislation regarding murders and domestic violence. A special commission recognized Robert Brown as dangerous to society, which automatically cancelled the possibility of early release after serving half the term. The criminal's appeal was rejected. He remains in prison to this day. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.